Hi guys, so just after Boris Johnson met with the leaders of the EU, Michael Gove was in Parliament giving warnings to the European Union. So let's hear what he had to say.
We did not vote in June 2016 to leave the EU, but still to be run by the EU.
Who's run by the EU? No one's run by the EU. I live here in Italy. We're not run by the EU. We elect our leaders. I think it's the same case in Germany, in Spain, in Portugal, in France. No one's run by the EU. I know this message is for the Brexiteers. This is a message for Brexiteers, telling them we're no longer run by the EU. We never were, but we're no longer run by the EU.
We cannot agree to a deal that gives the EU Court of Justice a role in our future relationship. We cannot accept.
The European Court of Justice has a role in enforcing European laws. So if you want to have a trade deal that includes European laws, then the European Court of Justice has to be involved. Now, not all of the trade will involve European laws. So in those aspects, the European Court of Justice doesn't have to be involved. Now, this is a way for perhaps Boris Johnson and the Tories to get out of saying, well, the European Court of Justice is involved, because they won't be involved in certain arbitration. It will only come to when it's an issue of European law. So Boris Johnson can say, look, the European Court of Justice is excluded, with a caveat. Or the European Union, the European Court of Justice is included with a caveat. So that it's, of course, be as opaque as possible when you're promising things. But the Brexiteers are not, I'm sorry, capable of understanding this.
Set restrictions on our legislative and economic freedom, unprecedented in any other free trade agreement. And we cannot agree to the EU's demand that we stick to the status quo on their access to British fishing waters.
So, of course, this issue of fishing, excuse me, it's political red meat for the Brexiteers. Now, the fishing industry, I've talked about it before, has almost zero impact on the UK economy. Zero impact when compared to, for example, the IT industry, manufacturing, construction, science. There's a whole rake of other industries that have a much bigger impact on the UK economy that are not being talked about in the Brexit deal. But fishing is. Why? Because Brexiteers believe it's important. They believe that it's core to Britain, to the British economy, when in reality it's not. Now, I can provide you data, but most people probably who disagree with me will not bother to look at it. But don't trust me. Go and do the research yourself. Put it into Google. What is the biggest industry in the UK? Or what are the top 10 industries in the UK? And you're not going to find the fishing industry there. Or if you do, it's the last one. There are much bigger fish, to excuse the quote, excuse the pun, in the UK that Brexit needs to deal with than fishing. But of course, it's just a tool that the Tories are using to bait, once again, to bait the Brexiteers.
So there must be movement, and the clock is ticking. The transition period ends on December the 31st. That was the manifesto pledge on which this government was elected, and it was the instruction from the electorate in the 2016 referendum to leave the single market and the customs union and to grasp the opportunities of full economic and political independence.
That is a lie. There was nothing in the referendum that said anything about the customs union or the single market. People like Nigel Farage, remember Nigel Farage? He had something to do with Brexit. He was talking about, of course we're not going to leave the customs union. Of course we're not going to leave the single market. So this idea that everybody knew, and I've talked about this before, I've been talking about this for 2-3 years, how Brexiteers were told one thing, and then they discovered something else was actually the reality of Brexit. And Michael Gove is standing here rehashing 2016 rhetoric, and he's not been held accountable for it.
4 years on from the referendum result, no one can argue that this is a rushed or a precipitate step. It is delivering at last on democracy. Of course,
Okay, I'm not even going to bother commenting on that.
Of course, we will manage the adjustment required at the end of the transition period in a flexible and pragmatic way to minimise any challenges and to maximise all opportunities.
To minimise any challenges. Okay, so we're going to deal with it in a pragmatic way. Do you remember when Brexiteers were talking about we need to leave the European Union as soon as possible? We need to leave immediately. We need to leave today. Now it's we need to leave in a pragmatic way. If I was a Brexiteer, I would be extremely angry with this type of rhetoric. What do you mean a pragmatic way? Are you kicking the can down the road again? There's talk about not imposing tariffs and controls on the border for 6 months after the UK leaves the transition period. What the hell is that about? How is that taking back control of the borders? How is that controlling our trade? Yeah, we're going to leave the borders open and keep the status quo for another 6 months. We've asked the European Union if that's okay. When will Brexiteers realise that they've been had? In the same way members of the NHS have been had by this government, that voters have been had when Boris Johnson said, I'm going to open 40 hospitals, I'm going to hire 20,000 police officers. When will people realise that they have been conned?
But the call from opposition politicians to extend the transition period is not in the national interest. Staying under the EU's control after this December would mean paying money.
Once again, it's not control. You're not under EU control.
Into EU budgets that we could spend on our NHS.
Okay, this really, really pissed me off. This is just disgusting. We're resurrecting the friggin' ridiculous argument of, well, if we don't spend this money, we can spend it on the NHS. Do you have a friggin' bus to put that on? Michael Gove should have a bus, a big red bus where he says, money for the NHS not going to the EU. I wonder if he could take something out of storage and paste it on the side, update it a little bit. This is disgusting. This is, once again, Brexit rhetoric, rehashed, resurrected, and he has the brass face to do that, and he's not been challenged on it.
Accepting new laws over which we would have no say, laws shaped in the interests of others, and being stopped from taking the actions that we need to supercharge our economic recovery.
We can't take decisions. Why can you not take decisions? Why, Michael? You decided to leave. It's like if it's an example I've given before, an analogy I've given before. I want to be part of a tennis club. Okay, I'm part of a tennis club. I join, I pay my membership. Then I decide I don't want to pay my membership anymore. I'm leaving. And then I'm on the outside and I'm complaining, oh, how come I can't play tennis in here anymore? I want to be able to play tennis in here, but I don't want to pay.
That would clearly not be in our national interest. And of course there is no intrinsic...
But you don't care about the national interest. You're interested in protecting a certain class of people who want to destroy British society and the economy in order to make a quick few quid. That's what it's about. This is what it has always been about. Eliminating regulations to benefit certain individuals and companies. Eliminating or reducing workers' rights in order to benefit certain individuals and companies. Reducing environmental standards, animal welfare conditions to benefit certain individuals and companies. And all the while, members of the Conservative Party taking a cut.
Reason why a deal cannot be concluded in good time. As Robert Azevedo, the Director General of the World Trade Organization, confirmed at the weekend, a deal between the UK and the EU can be reached in a timely way if the political will is there.
But of course a deal can be achieved. If you sign up to what the current status, if you say, well, we will accept what the European Union is presenting to us. The European Union is the bigger party here. They're the one, they said, this is what we have on the table. Do you accept it? Yes. Then it can be done. But you don't want to accept that. You want to do something different, but you want to pretend that you're willing to accept certain conditions, but you're not. You just want to walk away, but you want to pretend that you're not wanting to walk away. Not to bluff the European Union. It's to bluff the British people so that you can turn around after when everything is a complete and utter disaster and say, we tried our best, it's the European Union's fault. I can guarantee you, in the beginning of January, if there are problems, or if they extend, this trade issue, this transport and trade issue with customs checks and border checks for another 6 months, then it will ease the problem of Brexit. But if there are problems, I can guarantee you now that they will be blaming the European Union. It's the European Union's fault that there are delays in Dover. It's not our fault. Yes, it is your fault. You decided to leave. You decided to ignore the European Union. You decided to play hardball.
The UK's political will is there. Our position is reasonable, based on precedent, and we still have the time to bring a deal home.
What precedent? Based on precedent. What precedent, Michael? Are you going to talk about an Australian-style deal, which doesn't exist? Are you going to talk about a Canada-style deal, which is completely different? Are you going to talk about a Japanese-style deal, which took 7 or 8 years to complete? Which precedent are you talking about, Michael? Because there isn't one. It's a completely new scenario.
That is why the Prime Minister has led the drive to accelerate these talks, to reach agreement, and to ensure that next January we leave the regulatory reach of the EU and embrace the new opportunities our independence will bring. And I commend this statement to the House.
But I thought you were going to leave in a pragmatic way, maybe up to 6 months after. So are you leaving on the 1st of January, completely independent, as you say? Or is it a more pragmatic, well, we don't want to create a shock to the economy? Of course, Brexit will not create a shock because Brexit is, how can I say, a crowning achievement of this government. Everything will get better as soon as we leave the European Union. Like in the same way that they were talking about on the 31st of January 2020, as soon as we leave, there will be countries and companies queuing up to do trade deals with us. Companies no, but countries yes. They'll be queuing up to do trade deals with us. And which countries have you done trade deals with? Or are you working on trade deals at the moment with? Well, there's mention of Australia, but Australia has said, go sort out your problems with the European Union first. The United States is the same. The United States said, sign your trade deals with the European Union and then come to us. Oh, well, then we'll just leave on the WTO terms. But what about all these trade deals? So it's just lies. Lying to the public, hoping that they don't remember. And once again, when the end of the transition period arrives, so it's still a long way away, but when it does arrive and you start to see problems, I can guarantee you now, you can check back on this video 6 months from now, and I can guarantee you that the European Union will be to blame. Not Michael Gove, not Boris Johnson, not the British government, not Brexiteers who decided to create all of this mess in the first place. No, it's the European Union's fault. Let me know in the comments, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks. Why not become a Patreon and enjoy access to our Discord server where we share news, chat, and have some fun. If you become a patron, you can also make video suggestions on topics that are important to you. Check it out via the link in the description.